Hey there, and welcome back to Smoke Your Pipes and Be Silent. This is Paul and Lucia checking in again from the north of Sweden, where we are sitting in our little pipe shack. The nice spring April weather has turned back to snow, as it often does in the middle of April. We blame everybody who has changed over to summer tires too early. Here you have to have winter tires and summer tires by law, so people change to summer tires as soon as the roads get free of snow and ice, and then the snow comes back. So we generally wait a bit. You can sit down now. When the snow's, I'll pet you later. When the snow is out in the air, then I get especially into English blends, and I want some English. It's the right thing to do when it's snowing, I think. So I have my early morning pipe again. Working on my thesis and thinking my thoughts. One thought that's been rattling around in my head recently, that I've had a little bit of a struggle trying to find the right. Oh, bless you. Why don't you lay down? Struggle trying to find the right title for the right way to summarize it. But I've decided to go with the virtue of giving people a benefit of the doubt. I'll explain what I mean by that. If you want to amuse yourself for 15 minutes, there are some really great online tests that can tell you the specific definition of hell for your particular Myers-Briggs personality type, which is very amusing. If you think about everybody's different personality, there's a different worst case scenario for each of us of what we can turn out to end up in. Personally, I'm an ENTJ. And what that translates to for the worst case scenario for me, or my personal definition of hell, is something along the lines of someone is wrong and they have been put in charge of a large group of people. And you are forced to obey their inefficient and inept policies. And you have nothing you can say about it. That for me is a nightmare. Unfortunately, it's a nightmare I've lived in quite a few times. So if you're like me, you lose your mind when you can see what is right and true and smart, especially the right smart thing to do, and the people who are in charge are morons, right? Or at least that can be your reaction. I think with every gift there's a backside, you know. With every strength, there's an associated weakness that you have to watch out for. And I think for those of us with the strength of vision and strategy, where we can see the big picture and how to get there and where things are headed, especially with the gift of leadership that's attached to that. No, lay down. Then the backside of that becomes seeing what's wrong with the picture a lot of the time. And I struggle with that, and especially when I was younger, I would really struggle with being in situations where I had no authority, but I could see exactly what's wrong with everything around me. But at this point in my life, I'm 38 years old. I'm a father since about 1 year ago, 10 months ago. Married for almost 7 years. And I like to say that one of the most important lessons that I've learned in 7 years of marriage is just how easy and how often you can be right and wrong at the same time. And for those who are watching who are married, I think you might know exactly what I'm talking about. Don't tell my wife, but I'm totally sure that she has been wrong a number of times when I have been totally convinced that I'm right in whatever the situation is. Yet somehow I'm still wrong. And that has been frustrating. Just as much as I'm sure is it's frustrating for her in a different way. Now, our wives are always right in one way or another. So they say. But really they are. And what I've learned through my 7 years of marriage or so is that I can be totally right on the sort of the level of the topic that I'm convinced I'm right about, the objective level of how to, who knows what, load the dishwasher right is the classic example. Number of things that you could end up in an argument about that I'm pretty sure I'm right about the actual factual objective reality of what the right thing to do is. Yet we can still end up in a battle over it that can get to be emotionally taxing for both of us. And one thing I've learned in that way is that I can be totally right about whatever the thing is that I'm convinced that I'm right about. But at the same time, I can be unloving in the way that I'm right about it. Or disrespectful in the way that I'm right. And if that's the case, then I'm wrong. Because being unloving and disrespectful is wrong. I think one of the foundations of morality is to treat others in a loving way and in a respectful way, especially those who are closest to you and your family. But I think that extends to really everyone else as well in different ways. But I think my dog's attacking her foot. I think this ends up being harder and harder the further away people get from your relational sphere. When you have friends who you talk to things about, and your friend maybe says something that you don't agree with, your first reaction is, tell me more. I don't agree with that, but what do you I think I want to see what you mean. And so you may not think your friend is right on something, but you can have enough respect for giving that person the benefit of the doubt to hear them out on what they have to say. If you don't know that person, or that person maybe is your boss, or that person is somebody in the car that just cut you off, or someone that's on TV or on YouTube or in a White House somewhere or Swedish Parliament, who knows. You don't know that person and they say something that you're convinced is wrong, then all of a sudden they become an existential threat to you in a sense. Somehow you feel justified in you being right and that person being so totally wrong that being loving and respectful is no longer important. Because the farther somebody gets from your relational circle, then the fewer consequences there are for you expressing yourself that way, or so you think. I would like to argue that the way we treat people who we may never even be able to interact with face to face actually affects all of us in a way that has sort of ripples on the water that we're not necessarily aware of. Because it boils down to how you view people. And especially when it comes to people that you're convinced are wrong and that are not in your immediate circle of relationships to where you naturally give people the benefit of the doubt, naturally assume that they mean well, naturally can agree to disagree without that affecting your relationship, the further people get away from you in that way, the easier it becomes to judge and condemn them without even realizing that maybe that's what you're doing and that there's anything wrong with that. And that also means that you can view people more as objects of different kinds, objects of your personal gratification, objects of giving people the authority to destroy your whole life because you think they have so much authority over you. You know, objects of principle that you're so convinced you're right about that you turn one person or one group of people into the downfall of society, America, Sweden, Europe, the world, the church, your workplace, you know, fill in the blank. And I think that's the result of a general attitude towards people that is not giving them the benefit of the doubt. Not assuming that the people you disagree with may actually have reasons to think the way that they do that you don't totally understand and know about. Not assuming that someone else knows something that you don't, or that you, in fact, maybe aren't totally right in your assumptions either, even though I'm sure you are. There's a story from the Bible that I think exhibits this really well. And it's the story of the prodigal son. Prodigal son is found in Luke chapter 15, I think. It's the third of three parables that Jesus tells about things that have been lost and then found. One being a coin, a valuable coin that is dropped and then found, and the person who finds it is so happy they found it again. One being a sheep that is lost, that is the shepherd is happy to be receiving again. And one being a man who has two sons. And the one son tells his father that he wants his inheritance now, which is really offensive and terrible, and basically saying, I wish you were dead. And he takes his inheritance and he goes off to a foreign land and he squanders his inheritance. And as he's out of money and sitting in a pigsty and wishing that he was able to feed himself even on what the pigs are eating, he thinks to himself, oh man, I've really screwed up. You know what? My father's servants, they have more food than I have here. I can go home and say I'm sorry, or say that, acknowledge my wrong. And as he's on his way home, on a long way away, his father comes running and embraces him. And he says, my son was dead and now he's alive. We're going to have a big party. Before he was even able to, or when the son expressed his remorse for this, he doesn't even really set his words to what he actually did wrong. Or, there's a sense of you wonder what his motives totally are, but it's, you can dig around in the details of what the son was thinking in that situation. But I think the purpose of the story that we have it is because it's all about the father's reaction and the father's will for this son of his. That the important thing for this father is that his son would return home. And that is, of course, supposed to be a parable about God. But the thing is, there's a second son, and this second son is mad because his brother gets this big party when he's squandered his inheritance and done a whole bunch of stupid things, while this other son has done everything right, has stayed at home, has served his father well, and in his words, you don't even give me a young goat that I can have a party with my friends. And this exemplifies so well how you can be right and wrong at the same time. This older brother is totally right that this younger brother has been an idiot and doesn't deserve this party. But he totally misses the point of how he's to see this little guy, how he's to see this other person, his brother. And the interesting thing is, if you zoom out from this story, Jesus is sitting with sinners and tax collectors, I'm pretty sure it says, which is a general category, a general term for people that society saw as a problem, who did things that were truly wrong in many cases, but more than that, they were a problem for the Jewish people. And I will explain what that means. The Pharisees, they stand behind the people, and the people who know what they're talking about, the people who are right. They see Jesus sitting with these people and they say, what is he doing associating with them? And Jesus says, let me tell you a story. And he tells them 3 parables that end this way. What's important knowing about the Pharisees is that they were a movement that started after the return of Babylon, the captivity of the Israelites in Babylon, where the people for third time ended up in captivity because they had turned their backs on God, lived in ways that were wrong. They served other gods and they did all kinds of detestable things. And they ended up in a time of captivity that led to repentance and then them being able to go back to the promised land. In this time, when they then built the second temple in Jerusalem, after the first had been destroyed, the Pharisees started up as a movement. And they, rightly so, wanted to stir up the zeal of the people to live in the right way, to follow the law of God, to not turn their backs on what they know to be right. And what they ended up doing is they ended up creating even more rules to make sure that, we don't even get close to doing something wrong enough to end up in captivity. And in the Gospels, they're often the bad guys for various reasons. But you got to give them also the benefit of the doubt. They didn't want to end up having the nation in captivity, or worse, a punishment of sense to come from God that would have to lead to their repentance again. They wanted to strive for holiness. They wanted people to walk the straight and narrow path. And so they would see people that were not living the way that they thought that they should as an existential threat to the nation, in a sense. They were a disgrace to their people. It's part of the reason that the Sumerians are problematic in the Bible, in their understanding. But that's another story. So anyway, these Pharisees are completely convinced that these people who are doing wrong should be told they're doing wrong, and you shouldn't associate with them. But Jesus, he sits there and talks with them, and he tells them this story, the prodigal son. And what he's really saying in this story is, in that culture, if a younger brother were to go off and squander his inheritance in that way, the older brother should have gone and brought him home. The older brother should have gone after him and not just let him go. But what did he do? He stayed at home and was pissed about it. What were the Pharisees doing? Here there were sinners and tax collectors and people that were living in a way that is wrong, that was problematic for themselves and for the whole people. And the Pharisees were acting the older brother and thinking, these people are not deserving of the love and acceptance that Jesus was showing them. What this story shows, I think, is a general principle that is worth adopting for all of us, and that is the principle of seeing other people as on a journey. That nobody is fully formed yet. And when you see people that way, you can give them the benefit of the doubt of where they are right now, how wrong they may be. And you can have some humility to think that maybe you're wrong too, in ways that you may be right about, but are also wrong about, or at least in your delivery and your attitudes, right? Judge not others lest you yourself be judged, right? Another word from the good book. But bigger than that, more than that, Jesus in this story, he tells this story as an example of what the Father's will is for all of humanity. That God in his great love goes after the lost sheep, the lost sons, the lost coin as it may be. He doesn't leave us alone in our pigsty, but comes to us. And Jesus, who in the Christian tradition we understand to be God incarnate, he goes after us. He doesn't leave us where we are. And what does he do? He leads us home, one step at a time, one insight at a time, leads us in the direction that we have been created for relationship and for union with God in eternity. And that journey is individual for everybody. You know, each of us, our journey of life is a windy road. And if we consider, you know, those of us who have experienced that we're moving in the direction that is closer and closer to God, or a relationship to God somehow, that sometimes that journey goes this way, away from God, and then turns around towards back to it and back down. But in this big picture, there's an invisible hand at work in our life that is moving us in a direction that is the way God wants it to be, if we allow that to happen. And I think what that means is when we view other people and we can struggle with all the feelings that come from us being right and them being wrong, if we can instead see them as people that are on a journey as much as we're on a journey, and that we too can walk in Jesus' example of leading that person one step at a time closer to the truth, and whatever the area of truth is that we think they're wrong about, and in the big picture, leading them closer and closer to God himself, then I think in doing so, we cooperate with the grace of God for the whole world. We become a part of the solution, the fulfillment of all of creation. And at the same time, we avoid the trap that is viewing other people as an existential threat to me, you know? These people who are outside of my relational bubble that are so wrong that they're going to be the downfall of us all. They're just people that happen to be in a position of authority that has pissed you off. Condemning them and judging them isn't going to fix anything. But if you can instead view them as people who are on a journey, on their way somewhere, and that there might be a God who is working in the background in their life too, then you won't be so distracted by you being right and others being wrong that you miss the important opportunities that are right in front of you. The people around you in the sphere of influence that you have that can be following in Jesus' example of leading the people around you one step at a time closer to home. Society doesn't teach this. It teaches the opposite, in that the news and social media and, you know, the way we view people in traffic, you know, whatever the case may be. The world around us plays on our instincts of being pissed off at people that we think are wrong and that are outside of our immediate sphere of relationships. Gets us to click on links that take us to news articles that somebody makes money on because we clicked on it. I would suggest that we jump off that ship. Sure, it's good to know what's going on in the world around you, but don't let them trick you into turning people into objects of condemnation. When you can instead see the opportunity to give people the benefit of a doubt. to seek to understand before being understood, and assuming that other people may know something that you don't. I think if more of us lived that way, then the world would look a little bit differently. So I'm going to sit here and enjoy my early morning pipe and the snow falling around me. See you next time. This has been Smoke Your Pipe and Be Silent.